Are you sick and tired of looking through countless guides on the internet as a new player that just started out Honky Starbucks in 2025? Clueless, directionless, aimless. You don't know where to go and you are begging for someone to save you from a potential brickening of a lifetime. Well, worry not, ladies and gentlemen, because not myself, obviously, no, right? Bob is going to show you the way. That's right, ladies and gentlemen. As someone that is Bob's best friend, I have seen the growth of Bob's journey in the past going into 1 month of playing with Bob ever since its creation of 2025, our brand new free-to-play accounts. And here I'm going to be sharing with you top 10 best free-to-play tips that you can make use of to get your journey in Honky Starbucks off to a brilliant, Bob-tastic start. So without further ado, I'm jumping right in with no stall, and the very, very, very first tip that I think is gonna be very, very important. I'm not gonna be giving you guys like some boring ass useless shit. For example, level up your units, level up your tracers, spend your stamina, right? No, we're actually gonna go through important ass things that takes more than one second to explain. And the first thing that you guys need to start doing is going to not just focus on one team, but also prepare a couple of pocket trick shots in your backline. So there has been this advice, which is focus on one team, right? That has been since day one. You build up your one team, make them as strong as possible, and you slowly let them pivot out and do all of your content, do your SU, do your DU, do your storm disaster, and then only when you have gotten enough time, you have built up enough equilibrium levels to farm tracers more effectively, then start building up your second team. My suggestion for this tip is, for Bob at least, build up a couple of pocket trick shots aside from your beginning team of 4. What do I mean by pocket trick shots is they are namely units that you might not invest in them fully. Like for example, we are gonna be at level 80 for all these units with a good amount of tracers invested, but a couple of units such as your Pepella, your Bailu, right? Even if they are not at level 60, level 70, or even level 80, they still give you a tremendous amount of value, and it takes almost nothing for you to raise. In fact, I would say as a free-to-play player, do not be afraid to raise up multiple units in your lifetime. Maybe not now, maybe not tomorrow, but this thingy right here is gonna be the equivalent of 3 standard summons. And the materials required for these, they are most of the time very, very cheap. It costs you almost nothing to level them up, especially for a 4-star. Getting this throughout the course of your life, getting them up to level 70, it is not going to be seen as a waste, because you are going to be getting an abundance of resources that essentially just, it earns its value back by itself for free, right? So that is going to be the very, very first advice. The second advice is going to be this right here. I'm not even sure if people actually discover, because not even myself, I discovered this tip up until I've seen Bob's journey. You see this thing over here? Your equilibrium level, right? 20, 30, 40, 50, 60 respectively, it goes up. And it will make not only your efficiency for your domains, your stamina better, it also gives you more daily income, right? Your dailies, your weeklies. It gives you a little bit more Stellar Jades. One advice I can give to beginners is do not level this instantly. Especially if you're someone that wants to speed run through the story and events. Now, why that is the case is because when you level up your equilibrium level, not only do you upgrade your discount up, right? Not only do you upgrade your efficiency for the standard shadows, your cataclysm, your chem, it also makes the overall enemies more difficult. Very similar to if you play like Wandering Waves, Genshin, or whatever. The higher this is, the more difficult the enemies are. Now, this is not a problem if you have Acheron and you can one-shot the little mobs. but you can't do this with elites. If you're a player that intends to not pull for any unit, right? If you didn't pull for D, you just want to start off with a no pull account because you're saving up for future units, raising up the equilibrium level too fast, it actually slows down your progress of clearing all of these rewards. Because the chests, right? The chests that you see in the overworld, it is the exact same amount whether you do it at 20 or 65. It is the exact same. But the elites gets ridiculously difficult. So my advice is essentially just make them easy for you so that you can just clear them at your time, get the chests, and only after you are like, confident enough, then consider raising them up. And then you can farm your tracers, you can farm your catalysts, and kind of stuff, right? So that is gonna be tip number 2. Tip number 3. Now this might be a pretty, I'm not even sure if this is you might not even believe me, right? But your very first unit that you pull as a beginner, if you just started out Honkai starting 2025, the first banner unit you pull is gonna have a significant impact on how your early game as well as even mid game is gonna feel like. You are only ever going to have one single early game. You're only gonna experience your level 20s, level 30s, level 40s one time, and then it's gone forever. Just like in real life. Your 20s, 30s, 40s only last once, and it's never coming back. So this is the exact same principle in Honky Starbucks. If you were to have an endless cycle of endgame content, that was a basically perma refresh. Before you get to that point, you only have one single experience for your early and mid game. And on this note, the first unit that you pull, the value it brings to your account, especially in the early and mid game, pulling for a DPS is actually gonna feel better than pulling for a sustain. What is he even saying? Oh my god, pulling for limited DPS. This guy's fucking he's greedy and stupid. He's greedy and stupid. Now listen. The reason why this is the case is because if let's say you decided to pull for a sustain, right? If you pulled for let's just say you pulled for Bubbin right now. You start on version 3, you decide to skip D Herda, you want to secure Bubbin. What is 0 times 2? It is still gonna be 0. But what is 0 plus 1? That is gonna be 1. So you can kind of look in the lens of a value at least. Your first unit that you ever pull, the experience that you'll be feeling towards the early game and mid game is gonna feel a lot better from a DPS upgrade perspective compared to a support. Sure, you can run your Bubbin with like your QQ, your Danheng, right? Your Saval. You can run them. But I would argue you're probably gonna be in for a very rough time. Not only do you have no crit, you have no traces, you have no abilities, you have no light, you have nothing. Your baseline is so low, even if you were to get Robin's action value advance, even if you were to get the additional damage, it is not gonna lead to a very smooth experience, or rather not as smooth of an experience compared to if you put for a limited 5-star DPS as your first ever pull, right? As your first ever pull. However, if you were to pull for D Herda, right? I'm just gonna use D Herda as an example right now. She's a unit that even if you didn't have any of the limited sustains, right, or rather any of the limited 5 stars, she can essentially function very well with a essentially completely free team. RMZ is the GOAT, Herda is free, just pull better for Gallagher, or this sustain can be anyone. This experience you're going to be getting, even with complete dog shit ratio, is still going to feel better for you, especially in the early game and the mid game. We don't care about zero cycling, not even zero. We don't even care about the end game content, which most of the time you would require a proper team setup to actually tackle these end game content challenges, right? And you're only going to experience this once in your life. The moment you're past all of these early games, right, and then you reach level 65, you're going to look back and ask yourself, do you have fun playing Honky Starbucks during the early and mid game? Did the unit that you pull gave you that amount of value? Because the fundamental end of the day is, You're playing this in order to have fun. If you're playing this from a perspective of, oh, I need to be efficient, I only care about speed running to the end game, frankly speaking, you can't even do that. Unless you pull for an E6, you can't even speed run to end game within the first week because you have no units. You literally do not have enough units to tackle this, even if you want to build a supports. So for free to plays, I would actually recommend considering getting this 5-star limit DPS as your first unit, and then you start building from there. If you don't agree with me, if you still want to pull for a support, that's fine. But just be prepared that your early and mid-game experience is probably not gonna feel as smooth as compared to this, right? Why if you didn't start on the Herta patch? Why if you started on a patch like Scylla or Jingyuan back then? Then what? Now the thing with this is, no matter which point you start with, you are still only going to have one early game and one mid game. And not to mention back then, we don't even have units like Rame or Babin. There was no such thing as a limited sustain or as a limited support. So you basically had nothing to pull for if you are just waiting for that miracle 5-star harmony unit or a miracle 5-star nihility. God bless Silverwolf, oh my god. And let's just be real, even on Silverwolf's launch, her usage back then in 1.1, it was still very, very good, especially for new players. It's just that now, times have changed, and the early game experience, despite having the banners change, doesn't. You still only have this one early game. And the experience will always be better whether or not you decide to pull for a DPS to improve a 4-star Danheng, or decide to pull for a, I don't know, a Babin to supplement your 4-star Danheng. So my point is basically you only have one early game. Make the best use of it. You only have one childhood. You have one time in college. You have one time in adulthood before you retire. Try to make the best use of it and have the most fun before you eventually go into the bottomless pit of relic farming and endgame, right? So that is basically my point. Okay, tip number 4. This is basically your stamina usage. And we're just gonna lump this into one. How do you spend your stamina as a beginner starting out in Honkai Starbucks? So generally speaking, and you might think I'm talking like obvious shit that everybody knows. You'll be surprised how many people I've seen in all my account reviews that just doesn't give a flying fuck about tracers and just leave them at level 5. Yep, I'm looking at you. Alright? Tracers, they will always be permanent upgrades. Permanent upgrades, right? Permanent upgrades. The moment you unlock this, it's done. It's permanently upgraded and you will never have to look at it for the rest of your life ever again. You could farm the relic cavern for 10,000 times and you could not get a single good shit. But the moment this is done, this is done. You are free. Be free, my little man, right? You just need to get this done once and once only, and you never have to look at it again. So from a perspective of whether you do it now or do it later, it has to be done anyways if you want to make your unit stronger. So from a stamina perspective, going all in for tracers would be the most important priority, followed by, if you want to have, additional credit, experience, because you are not really spamming, you speed running autos, you can get them as you need. Do not farm relics until at least level 60, because level 60 is essentially the most efficient part. And before you reach this, you can also get a couple of relics here and there from the normal story, from the normal events, as well as even Echoes of War, and you just run Rainbow, right? Like, okay, literally, look at this shit. Most of our stuff is just still +0, because we just have nothing good for us going on. Alright, I try to force this a little bit. It is basically completely unupgraded because I'm still not level 65. We did gamble a little bit, but I'm going to talk about this a little bit later by the power of Wishful Resin. God bless that way. But essentially, you don't need to invest in relics whatsoever, and you can still pretty much clear all of your early and mid-game content, namely story, events, SU, DU, Storm Disaster, Golden Gear, and Unknowledgeable Domain, right? So relics are the least of your concern. There are 3 key levels of permanent upgrades in terms of equivalent level. Your level 50, at this particular point, that's when your EXP and your relic experience and your Litecoin experience, which is going to be your Calyx Gold, right? This right here, this will be mixed up. Level 60 is when your Calyx Crimson and your Stagnant Shadows is maxed out. And level 65 is when your Cav of Corrosion is maxed out. So keep your head of these 3 different levels of maximum efficiency. I would say that even though you max out Golden at like level 50, I don't think you will be dumping a lot of stamina here, because you're actually given a lot of this throughout the course of all of the events and stories that we have built up for the past almost 2 years, right? So you would still most likely farm a little bit more in Crimson Domain, even if it's not at the maximum efficiency, because building up a unit completely free to play, it takes quite a bit of stamina. It takes quite a bit of stamina, right? So a stamina plan I would suggest is between 1 through 50, right? You will be done with it within a week. The moment you speed run through the story and all that, it will give you so much experience. You will be almost at level 60. So just play the game and get as close to level 60 as possible, and then you just farm whichever you feel lagging. If you really have no credit, which is, in my opinion, is basically impossible, then you can farm. But otherwise, stick to your tracers. 60 to 65 is basically your tracers plus essential material. You can also consider pre-farming for future units. You should only pre-farm only upon reaching level 60. Do not pre-farm unless you reach level 60, because you're not efficient, right? Then once all that is done, up until level 65, you can start your congratulations. Welcome to adulthood. Welcome to the grind. This is all there is to it. Enjoy, right? So that is pretty much it gonna be for our stamina plan. And tip number 5, which is kind of similar to tip number 4, which is this thingy right here. There's this thing which is gonna be shown in your stamina potion, right? Stamina potions, there was a bit of a discussion for the usage rate, especially in the earlier phases of Honkai Starbucks back when it first launched. One school of thought, which was myself back then, it was good to just dump everything instantly and try to get to a level as fast as possible, because the faster you level up, the faster you unlock your equilibrium levels, and the faster this goes up, you actually get more stellar jades per day and per week from your dailies as well as your weeklies, based on your equilibrium level. Then, the moment you dump everything, your natural stamina can then be used to essentially be farming the more efficient domain, right? So speed running back then, it was kind of a train of thought. There was another train of thought, which is to save your potions only until you can farm the maximum efficiency. I think most community, they were thinking about level 65, because then you can dump them all into relics, because you have been farming nothing but tracers for like the past 64 levels, right? So at this point in 2025, I would say this. Like I mentioned just now, you actually gain a shit ton of experience back then. Or rather, you get a shit ton more experience now compared to back then. Why? Because you're instantly given 1.5 year worth of story and events from the get-go. So you can actually power level your Trailblaze level incredibly fast compared to last time. So you don't really have that big of a downtime when it comes to this. For Bob, within 2 weeks, okay, but this is to say, this is not representative of the average player, because we have the Bob Council farming, perma farming events, perma farming story to just speedrun this, right? You don't have to do this yourself, but you have this backlog of one-time clears that as long as you play the game and you speedrun them through, you can actually gain an incredibly high amount of Trailblaze experience, to the point where for Bob, after finishing almost everything, he was around level 58 in roughly 2 weeks. So as long as you clear all these one-time clear Trailblaze level, that should be roughly where you are at. So you actually don't really have a phase where you're not farming efficiently, because you can essentially reach close to level 60 by the time you're done with everything. So because of this, I would actually recommend hoarding your stamina until level 60. I've mentioned this in my previous Bob progress, whatever. Holding your stamina until level 60 and then dumping them all into tracers, in my opinion, is the most efficient way, right? Because you level up faster, which means you reach level 65 before the other people, which means that you unlock the equivalent level faster to get more stellar jades. And when you dump them at level 60, you are essentially farming them in the most efficient place that it can be, right? Which is basically going to be your Crimson Calyx as well as your Standard Shadow, right? So these two are the most efficient way. So dumping them at level 60 has inherently no difference when you dump them at level 65. In fact, it's even less efficient since you're leveling up slower. Whereas the guy that dumped them can reach level 65 even faster than you, right? So that is gonna be whether or not should you spend your stamina potions. Tip number 6. High value units. High value units I'm not going to be talking about which 5 stars to pull because this is fundamentally going to be dependent on your personal preference, but high value units that basically everyone can try to look out for. I would say that the high value units in 2025 nowadays, it is very, very different from high value units back in 2023 when the game first launched. Now, the reason why that is because last time, for example, when you see units like Tingyun, right, it's like, oh my god, she's so goddamn important, right? Everybody needs to raise her and everything. But for Bob specifically, I have noticed that I haven't really made full use of Tingyun for a while. Namely because the meta is shifting, right? It's always shifting. At the start of the game, it was just crit DPS. Nowadays, you have dual DPS, you have units like RMC, even units like Bronya. It might not even be as valuable anymore because we're constantly getting the shifts in the art that we'll be getting, right? So some high value units that I would highly recommend anyone raise, one of them being your Trailblazer, right? This unit, when you level them up, the level is shared for all paths. Every single path is basically level 80, right? So you should 100% level this up. Unlike Genshin Impact, this is actually ridiculously good unit. Between Harmony MC as well as Remembrance unit, unfortunately, you guys couldn't pull for any of Ramen. You guys can't pull for Fugue, so you are probably not going to be running Harmony MC for a very long time. But you would still use Harmony MC in the early game before RMC because super break damage is really, really high in simulated universe. So if you want to play in SU, this is honestly a pretty decent path. I didn't really invest. Yo, bro, that's no 6 months. I didn't really invest in the trace
Happy
at all.
Lunar New Year.
Yippee. I didn't really invest in the trace at all. Just a little bit here and there. And then I just dumped everything into the EXP as well as the light coins. And then I swapped past to RMC, right? So high value unit, Trailblazer, specifically RMC, as of this current point of time, especially if you play Herta or any of the most right DPS, right? Or any of the original or whatever. Herta, baby Herta, she is pretty high value, even more so if you put for Herta and you run her as a battery build. If you do not run her as a battery build, you can still use her in the next time when you play Pure Fission. She is just that versatile, so no harm, no foul in raise her. Gallagher, currently, it kind of depends, because Mihoyo in Honkai, sometimes it gives you a 4-star selector. This time it gave us Tingyun. Sometimes it does in fact give you Gallagher. So you can just kind of wait and see a selector if you don't have a Gallagher yet. But he is pretty much the best 4-star sustain. By far. No one really comes close to what he has to offer. Excellent unit, especially with Cripple Crow, action very advanced, and a lot of taskbar damage, which is gonna be a very important factor, right? Hunt March 7th. I've already said this enough. I'm not gonna grill her. I'm not gonna glaze her any more than I need to. An excellent Gorge Down unit, especially if you pair up with Harmony Trailblazer. Gallagher, these three would be like one of the core for your early game SU experience, right? Super good, especially if you don't even want to pull for Herta. Pella, it is still good enough. She's kind of like the Pokke trick shot, right? She's a sidearm, right? She's a baby pistol. You will most likely still run her in Team 2, especially for your second team, right? And you don't really need a lot of investments. Raise up only the talent and ultimate, and that's pretty much all you need. Doesn't really care about items, ending. Super cheap, super easy to invest. Every other unit, I would say it's not that important unless you decide to skip a DPS and you pull for support, then you could consider your 4-star DPS, which is yeah. Your sustains, I'm gonna talk about them a little bit more separately. Tingyun, I would feel that she's still really decent, but I see less usage of her as compared to some of the other units that I have listed over here. Right, so that's gonna be that. And I would bring this part to now the standard DPS, right? So this is still under high value units, right? So this is still under high value units. Your standard DPS. So in case you guys didn't know, at 300 pools, you can basically select this for free. It's still up here. I'm at 110 for Bob, and we have quite a bit of decent pools left. For your standard DPS, I would say back in 2023, the most obvious choice was Bronya. Alright, we didn't have any of the sustains, alright, we didn't have any of the supports, we didn't have Runmei, we didn't have Bubble, we didn't have Sparkle, we didn't have anything, right? Bronya was pretty much one of the best choice. Sometimes people wanted to choose Kala, sometimes people want to choose Himeko, depending on the content, sure. But I think nowadays, none of these standard units would probably change your life. If there can only be one unit that has the highest future value, it is most likely going to be Himeko, right? She's erudition. you could play her as a battery, but she's worse than Baby Herta. She's good for pure fiction. She can be run as Super Break. She is most likely going to be performing not too shabbily in like average content. All these other units, they essentially have almost no future value, especially at the E0 S0 baseline, right? Bronya, I can't believe she did has just got power grab by RMC. She has no skill point. The buff lasts 1 turn. Is deadless, right? So she almost serves no purpose unless you eventually get like E1 or even E6. But RMC legit just does the job better than Bronya. Well, Yang, it is what it is. Japard and Bailu, I would say these two are probably one of your better value units in the early and mid game. Because you need 2 teams. And I would say that in the early game, for pretty much any new players, pulling for sustain is not as game changing as pulling for a upgraded support or even an upgraded DPS, because you can kind of get by even with Bailu and Japard. Their sustain is good enough for the early and mid game. By end game, you should have already built up enough units and built up enough relics to the point where you can start looking into your options. But in the early and mid game, upgrading your DPS and upgrading your supports is going to be more important. So if you actually did manage to get Japard and Bailu, you can use them for either Team 1 or Team 2. And they are going to be able to sustain very well, especially if you're talking about like SU or like DU. Japard's shield has a lot of synergy, especially with the preservation path, right? So it can make your life even easier. Kerala and Yanqing, okay, Yanqing, I think, fuck it. Kerala honestly is a pretty kind of universal utility-based DPS. She's pretty beefy. She deals quite a decent amount of counter damage. She has a skill, not too bad, but the moment you get any of the version 3 DPS archetypes, you will feel a world of difference between using Kerala or like any of the other units, right? So that is gonna be the standard units in terms of which one to, whichever you get, which one you should raise, and which one you should choose, right? So that is gonna be that. Tip number 7. This is kind of tied to my previous point about high value units and my very first point of leveling one team with a couple of pocket trick shots, or a couple of sidearms, which is how do you decide on who to pull? Technically, this advice is not just for free-to-plays, but it is especially important for free-to-plays and new free-to-plays because it will essentially shape how your account will look like for the rest of your lives. So how do you decide who to pull? I don't want to yet about it too much over here. You can, if you want an example, follow my journey with Bob, where all of my free-to-play account updates, I will go through with you guys what are Bob's thought process when it comes to which units to pull, and how can you make this the best possible experience for your own account, because every single account, every single individual, you have different preferences, right? Some people like D-Herda, some people like Mighty, some people like casters. It really depends on how you want to make it. One important thing to take note over here is that you can see Bob, this is a complete free-to-play, by the way. A complete free-to-play, this is roughly 3 weeks old. After clearing through every single one of the one-time clear rewards, we have roughly 60,000 Stellar Jades with 21 limited summons. After pulling and securing E0, S0 Herta, and I think 70-ish pulls, right? So you can say that throughout Bob's lifetime, in the past 3 weeks, a free-to-play should have roughly 450 pulls by the time 3 weeks are over. Which means that you are going to have an abundance, a shit ton of pulls. But please hold self-control, because this will be the highest amount of head start you will ever get in your entire life as a free play. These are essentially the biggest life savings unless you win this. This is an event that's going on right now. Unless you win this, you are not gonna be able to, this is it, right? So I am highly advising new free plays to 慎重考虑, alright? Think carefully before deciding all in, because you feel like you have a lot of pools now, but future patches, it will never ever give you this amount ever again, right? This is a one-time thing, so please think carefully before pulling. And for pulling advice, just check out my journey, and I kind of just explain how Bob will plan his own pools as a brand new free-to-play account, right? So that's gonna be that. Okay, tip number 8. This is gonna be a little bit more of a advanced tip. So by the time you reach tip number 8, you should be roughly 2 or 3 weeks in the game, roughly level 60, and you're thinking of this kind of endgame stuff, right? There are 3 endgame content in Honkai Starbucks that refreshes, which means that if they refresh, the rewards, which is Stellar Jades, they will never come back ever again. So these are like your income stream that will only happen as long as you clear them, right? So tip number 8 is try to pace your team building with the refresh that is gonna occur. So for example, Pure Fiction is gonna refresh in 5 days. For Bob, he would try to start slowly pivoting into Pure Fiction before this refreshes and just do his best as much as he can. I'm not saying he needs to clear 80,000 points for all 4 stages, or the same thing for A-Ball Shadow. Just try to build up your pocket team, right? Your sidearm, 2 teams, and get as many Stellar Jades as possible, because there is going to be permanent Stellar Jades added to your account. So for Bob example, right? We tried Apoc Shadow 1 day before it refreshed, and we still got a pretty nice 240 Stellar Jades with essentially level 60 and level 50 units, with like a level 40 Pela and a level 40 Bailu. So it is still a very, very decent increase of stamina, or rather Stellar Jades. So consider pacing your team building around the endgame refreshes. Tip number 9. This is pretty much going to be one of the last tips. Vertical investment or horizontal investment. This doesn't just apply to new free plays. This applies to, I think, almost everybody playing Honkai Star Bars right now with Power Creep, HMG, with everything. Vertical or horizontal investment. Here's the thing. If you are someone that can keep up with the banners that Honkai Star Bars releases, and you want to have the easiest possible time, technically speaking, pulling for every single new unit is going to give you the easiest time. So by that definition, horizontal investment is going to help you cover everything, right? For every single time a brand new unit comes out, all endgame content will be tailored for that new unit. So even at E0, S0, you're going to be chilling. But the problem with doing this is most, if not all free-to-plays, unless you are legit like the luckiest person on earth, you are not able to keep up. It is impossible for you to keep up. You are eventually going to reach a point where you will run out of pools because you keep chasing the new units. So, an example, right? Let's just say you are somebody that wanted to play Break. And upon Boot Hill's release for Break, they made the content perfect for Boot Hill because it was mainly focused on single target, or it allowed an environment where he can gain these pocket trick shots very easily. Not just for the buffs, but also for the enemies that Boot Hill was facing. So you pull for Boot Hill and you commit, he's going to be feeling great. And then we release other new break DPS like Firefly as well as Reba. So at this point, you could still use Boot Hill in an environment, let's just say Reba, right? Against all these content, Boot Hill might not be doing too good. He's going to be facing more difficulties. But at the end of the day, they are all break DPS. And as a general rule of thumb, as long as you are logging into this one archetype, it's completely fine if you're facing more difficulties compared to the brand new unit. And you need to be okay with that. So the moment you're okay with this, you can then start thinking about, do you want to build up a archetype to cover your weaknesses? Do you want to vertically invest in the current Boot Hill team with either like E1 Ramei, you want to pull for Fugue, you want to pull for Lingsha, all that kind of stuff? So just know that as a free-to-play, you simply cannot keep up. And I would personally say, at least this is what Bob is going to be doing, lock into 2 archetypes. Unless MiHoYo release like 3-team content, then that might be a little bit good, right? So for now, log into 2 different archetypes, and you focus on pooling units that can vertically make this archetype stronger, be it support, be it sustain, be it, or even like a DPS island, right? This is why some people that only play version 1 team, like Scylla, like Jingliu, Jingyuan Blade, or even DOT, even if they play version 1 teams, they can still make them clear the current content now, because they decided to vertically invest in these kind of archetypes. This is strictly from like a resource synergy management perspective. And if you don't want to do this and you pull horizontally for every new unit, just be prepared to essentially, run out one day, right? Run out one day. Never, ever, ever pull for meta. Because the meta always changes. It is always designed to upsell the latest unit. The moment the meta is gone, and you feel that, oh shit, I wasted my pools, that's when you got baited, right? You got FOMO'd. Never ever pull for meta. Stick to the plan. work on a plan, know that there are going to be ups and downs, and remember the reason why you played Honkai Starbucks. Do you play it to earn Stellar Jades, or do you play it to enjoy the goddamn Gyats and the Bobas? Okay, anyways, now we come to the final tip, and arguably the most important tip. You have to watch MrPokke's channel at twitch.tv/MrPokke.com. We have one of, if not the best community right here, right? We can teach you about team building, we can teach you about future planning, how to unbreak your resources, and leave any questions you have down below, and I'll try to answer as many of your questions as possible, because I am truly the greatest of all time in Honkai Starbucks. I will try to save every single one of you new free-to-play players starting Honkai Starbucks in 2025. So with that, I wish you all the best in your journey for this year, and hopefully I'll see you guys around in my community. The word of the day is gonna be Hail Pokke, join Twitch, join Discord, join all the way. See you guys next time.